Of all the places a traveler from North America, Australia, or anywhere in the English-speaking world can go, the United Kingdom is the one where they arrive feeling most prepared. The language is theirs. The culture has been exported so thoroughly. The films, the television, the music, the literature, the accents they've been hearing their entire lives, that the country feels pre-known before the plane lands. There are no unfamiliar signs to decipher, no social codes to guess at, no language barrier producing the productive discomfort that forces a traveler to pay attention. The UK feels legible from the moment you clear customs, and that feeling of legibility is the most expensive mistake you can make there. Because legibility and understanding are not the same thing, and the UK is one of the places where the gap between them is widest. The tourist who arrives already knowing the country stops looking at it. They don't ask the questions that produce real discovery, because nothing signals to them that questions are necessary. They move through a place that feels familiar and come home with a version of it that is almost entirely made of things they already had before they left. The red buses, the black cabs, the pub with the hanging sign, the queue, the dry wit. The surface confirmed.
The country missed.
Start with the most foundational mistake, because everything else builds on it. Treating the UK and England as synonyms and treating England and London as synonyms, and therefore spending an entire week in one city, believing you've seen a country. The United Kingdom is 4 nations, England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, held together by a political union that each of them relates to differently, and in some cases ambivalently or actively with tension. This is not a trivial internal distinction. Scotland has its own parliament, its own legal system, its own education system, its own established church, its own banknotes, and a national identity built in significant part around not being England. A distinction that runs deep enough to have produced a serious independence referendum in 2014 and an ongoing political conversation about whether the union should continue at all. Wales has its own language, spoken daily by several 100,000 people, visible on every sign in the country, and an identity similarly distinct from England's, similarly shaped by a history of being absorbed by a more powerful neighbor and not having entirely forgotten it. Northern Ireland carries the most complex identity of all, a place where questions of nationality, religion, and belonging remain politically live in ways that most visitors are almost entirely unaware of. A tourist who books a trip to the UK and spends it in London has visited England. If they then describe their trip as visiting Britain, or use British and English interchangeably, they've made exactly the kind of casual error that Scots, Welsh, and Northern Irish people notice and find, depending on the individual, mildly irritating to genuinely offensive. This is not pedantry. It reflects real, lived national identities that the international tourism industry consistently flattens into a single British package, and the locals in the other 3 nations are very much aware of it. The practical corrective isn't complex. Go beyond England, or at minimum, understand clearly which nation you're in and what that means. Scotland and Wales are not the English countryside. They are different countries with different histories, different cultural textures, and different things to offer, and they deserve to be visited on their own terms rather than treated as picturesque extensions of London. The second mistake is London itself, specifically the version of it that most tourists experience, which is a city that has been packaged so completely for visitors that it bears a complicated relationship to the actual place where 9 million people live. London is genuinely one of the great cities of the world. The museums alone, the British Museum, the V&A, the National Gallery, the Tate Modern, and a dozen others, most of them free to enter, which is an extraordinary thing that visitors consistently fail to appreciate, justify a trip of their own. The history is real and staggering. A single afternoon walk from the Tower of London to Parliament covers more than 1,000 years of recorded political and architectural history in a way that no other city quite replicates. This is not performative. It's the actual substance of the place, and it deserves real time. But the London that most tourists inhabit is an increasingly thin tourist circuit. Buckingham Palace, the Tower, Westminster, Borough Market, Notting Hill because of the film, Camden because somebody told them, and a pub somewhere that turns out to be full of other tourists doing the same thing. This circuit can be done in 2 days, and many people give it 5, which means they've done the same 2 days 2.5 times and concluded that London is slightly overrated. The London that rewards and keeps rewarding is neighborhoods. Bermondsey and Peckham in the south, which have become some of the most genuinely interesting eating and drinking neighborhoods in the city, without being designed for outside visitors. Hackney and Dalston in the east, operating at a pace and a cultural register that has nothing to do with tourist London. Brixton, with its market and its history, and its particular South London energy. Walthamstow, where the William Morris Gallery sits in a Georgian mansion almost nobody visits despite Morris being one of the most influential British designers of the 19th century. These aren't secret places. They're simply the places the tourist map doesn't emphasize, because the tourist map is built around landmarks, not neighborhoods, and London is a city where the neighborhoods are the actual content. The third mistake is specifically Scottish, and it gets made constantly. Treating Edinburgh as Scotland. Edinburgh is an extraordinary city. The medieval Old Town and the Georgian New Town together form one of the most architecturally cohesive urban environments in Europe. The castle is genuine and commanding rather than merely picturesque, and the concentration of culture, food, and history in a compact walkable city makes it one of the most rewarding short visits in the UK. But Edinburgh is a capital city, shaped by capital city functions, and the Scotland that makes the country genuinely singular is almost entirely elsewhere. The Highlands are an hour's drive or a train journey north of the city, and the landscape they contain, the deep glens, the lochs, the almost entirely empty moorland, the particular quality of the light under a sky that is always doing something dramatic, is one of the great wildernesses left in Europe, and it exists in a country that fits inside the state of South Carolina. The Isle of Skye, which has become famous enough that it now requires managing around its own crowds on the most popular trails, is still genuinely extraordinary, and the rest of the Hebridean Islands, the Outer Hebrides, Orkney, Shetland, are less visited and in some ways more powerful, carrying a sense of deep historical layering. Neolithic monuments, Norse place names, a crofting culture that persisted into living memory that Edinburgh, for all its beauty, can't provide. Scotland is also home to whiskey in a form that has nothing to do with the airport duty-free bottle. The distilleries of Speyside, Islay, and the Highland regions are operating working environments that produce the final character of what they make through specific geography, the peat, the water, the air, the particular microclimate of a specific glen, and visiting them is a genuine encounter with place as product that no whiskey bar anywhere else replicates. This also requires getting out of Edinburgh, which is the correction most Edinburgh visitors never make. The fourth mistake is the weather, and it's a mistake in both directions. The UK's weather has a reputation so thoroughly established that some visitors overprepare for misery and others dismiss it as exaggeration and underprepare entirely. The honest version: it's unpredictable, it changes fast, and it varies more by region than the international reputation suggests. London in July is genuinely pleasant, often warm, occasionally hot. The Scottish Highlands in any month is a different proposition, beautiful in all weathers, but genuinely cold and wet in ways that require real kit rather than a light jacket. Wales gets significant rainfall. Northern Ireland is milder along the coast than the inland reputation suggests. The practical lesson isn't pack for rain everywhere always. It's to check specific regional forecasts for the specific places you're going rather than applying one national weather assumption to a country whose north and south exist in meaningfully different climatic conditions. The fifth mistake is the pub misused. The pub is not a bar. This distinction matters more than it sounds. A bar serves drinks. A pub is a specific British and Irish institution built around a kind of structured informality, a neighborhood anchor. A place where different sections of local life have historically intersected, with its own codes around ordering, at the bar, not from a waiter. Rounds: if someone buys you a drink, you buy one back. And a culture of conversation with strangers that operates on quite specific unspoken rules about when it's welcome and when it's intrusive. The tourist who sits in a pub waiting for table service, orders a pint and a burger from a Wetherspoons chain, and concludes they've had the pub experience, has consumed pub-shaped product rather than the actual thing. The actual thing is a local, a neighborhood pub, not a tourist area pub, visited at the right time of day, with some patience for the slightly indirect social warmth that British strangers extend before they're willing to talk to you properly. It takes more than one visit to get right, and it's worth the effort. The sixth mistake is Northern Ireland, and the mistake is almost always omission, not visiting at all, or treating it as an afterthought. Belfast has undergone one of the most remarkable urban transformations of any city in Europe. A city that was largely off the tourist map for most of the late 20th century because of the Troubles has emerged as one of the most interesting, most honest, and most genuinely engaging places to visit in the British Isles. The murals on the peace walls in West Belfast aren't decoration. They're a living record of conflict, trauma, and ongoing reconciliation, and the black taxi tours that guide visitors through them, conducted by locals who lived through the period being described, are some of the most powerful guided experiences available in any city. Belfast also now has a genuinely excellent food and drink scene. The Titanic Museum is significantly better than its subject matter suggests, and the surrounding landscape, the Antrim Coast Road, the Causeway Coast, the Giant's Causeway itself, is among the most dramatic coastal scenery in the UK. More than any other part of the UK, Northern Ireland requires visitors to arrive with some basic historical awareness rather than none, because the context for almost everything you see there, the murals, the flags, the architecture, the conversation, is specific and can be misread badly without it. But it rewards that awareness generously, and the tourists who give it a proper 2 or 3 days almost universally describe it as the part of the trip they least expected and most remember. The seventh mistake is not the most obvious one, but it's perhaps the most specifically British: arriving without understanding irony. British understatement and indirection are not personality defects. They are a cultural tradition that shapes communication at almost every level, from the way people complain, "It's not ideal" means it's a significant problem, to the way they pay compliments. "Not bad" from a Brit is often genuine praise, to the particular dry humor that can slide past someone who's listening for sincerity and find only neutrality. The tourist who interprets British politeness as unfriendliness, or British reticence as coldness, is translating correctly from the words and incorrectly from the culture, reading what was said rather than what was meant, which in Britain are frequently different things. This isn't a barrier that should put anyone off, but it's a texture worth being attuned to, because the same culture that can seem distant at first is, once you're inside it, one of the warmest and most sardonic and most specifically funny in the world. And that warmth is invisible to the person who stopped looking because the language felt familiar. The UK is not difficult. It doesn't demand the adjustment that Japan or Morocco demands. But that ease of entry is itself the trap, because easy to navigate and easy to understand are not the same country. The traveler who mistakes the legible surface for depth spends their entire trip in a very expensive replica of a place they've seen on television. The one who pushes past the familiarity, into the other nations, into the real neighborhoods, into the pub as institution rather than the pub as backdrop, into the murals in Belfast and the glens of the Highlands and the Welsh signs whose language has been spoken on those hills for 15 centuries, finds a country that is nothing like the version they arrived carrying in their head. Which is, of course, the whole point of going anywhere. Thanks for watching. If you found this useful, smash that like button and subscribe to When to Travel. We're all about helping you make smarter travel decisions. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. And hey, if you think your friends need this, share it. Comment below with your next destination or your biggest travel question. I'm reading all of them. Let's go.